When Silence Spoke. Chapter 1. The Invisible Weight. Mathew couldn't quite pinpoint the exact moment when he started losing himself. Maybe it was after the day his wife decided to leave, worn out from dealing with his constant emotional absence, a void even he couldn't understand. Or perhaps it was when his father passed away, his last link to any kind of roots or security, and he found himself plunged into a raw loneliness, surrounded by unanswered questions and a silence that swallowed him from within. The truth was, at 38 years old, Mathew appeared to the world as a fulfilled man. But he was only a shadow of the person he once dreamed of being. He worked as an engineer at a reputable company, held a respected position, earned a good salary, and dressed carefully, as if trying to mask the inner chaos with elegance. His posture was impeccable, his reports precise. Yet a closer look, just a second longer of attention to his face, revealed the vacant stare, the dull eyes, as if he was always somewhere distant, unreachable, living on autopilot, his days repeated endlessly. Wake up, go to work, meet goals, come home, eat whatever, sleep, or at least try to. Nothing seemed to have real meaning. He no longer believed in people. He saw no point in the days. The idea of God seemed absurd, a fabrication to fill the emptiness for those who couldn't bear reality. Sundays were especially cruel. He wandered through parks just to distract himself, but the sight of smiling families, children running, couples exchanging tender moments only exposed his own loneliness. It was as if the whole world were celebrating, except him. At night, the silence of his apartment took on an almost tangible form, thick, suffocating, louder and more deafening than any city noise. Mathew tried to numb himself with endless TV shows, strong drinks, or long baths, as if the water could somehow wash away what he felt inside. But nothing was enough. The emptiness remained, steadfast, living in every corner of his soul. Then, one ordinary night, without any special sign, something happened. Amid the usual silence, something different made itself felt. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a vision. It was a perception, a subtle, almost imperceptible feeling, but real. As if silence itself, long ignored, had finally decided to speak. Chapter 2. The Light That Was Unseen. It was a gray Friday, one of those days when the sky seems to weigh down on your shoulders. The rain fell steadily, splashing on the cobblestones and forming puddles on the bustling sidewalks of the city. Mathew walked without a clear destination, just trying to escape the suffocating routine, or himself. Turning a corner, he spotted a small bookstore with an old-fashioned facade, almost hidden between modern buildings. He decided to go in, more to shelter from the downpour than out of any real interest in books. Inside, the atmosphere contrasted sharply with the chaos outside. The smell of aged paper mixed with the soft aroma of coffee from a small machine in the corner filled the air. Warm yellow lights created a cozy, almost magical ambiance. Mathew wandered slowly among the wooden shelves, absent-mindedly running his fingers along the spines. No title caught his eye, until, without knowing why, his gaze settled on a simple pale blue book cover, hypnotic in its quietness. The unusual title sparked an unexpected curiosity. He couldn't explain why, but something inside him whispered that he had to take it. It wasn't a rational choice. It was instinct, or perhaps a silent call from a forgotten part of himself. For days, the book lay untouched on the living room table. Mathew watched it from a distance, as if waiting for the right moment to open it, or gathering courage to face whatever it might stir. That moment came one sleepless night when even bodily exhaustion couldn't silence the unrest in his soul. With a deep, almost skeptical sigh, he opened the book. The first pages were dense, filled with philosophical reflections demanding focus, but as he read on, something began to change. A strange but comforting sensation started to grow within his chest. It wasn't just the words that touched him, it was how they were written. There was a hidden tenderness, a wisdom that seemed to know him completely. It was as if someone who had known him for a long time, perhaps forever, was speaking directly to him. The words carried no weight of dogma or religious rules. They spoke of a father, not a distant or authoritarian human father, but a divine presence, loving and eternal. A perfect being who asked for nothing in return, who didn't push away, but offered shelter, the source of all life, goodness and truth. This father was not a judging figure. On the contrary, he was described as someone who waited, who understood silences, failures, and wounds, who remained patient, silent, constant. And despite the distance Mathew thought he had created, he had never truly been absent. Then the tears came, first timid, then uncontrollable. It wasn't sadness. It was as if an invisible dam had burst. It was the relief of being seen, of realizing that, even without knowing it, someone had always been there, waiting for him to open his eyes, or his heart. That night, with the book resting open in his lap and the sound of rain still falling outside, Mathew had the strange feeling that, for the first time in a long time, he was truly not alone. Chapter 3. The Encounter. From that rainy night on, something inside Mathew began to change. There were no fireworks or dramatic revelations. On the outside, everything looked the same. He still woke up early, dressed with the same impeccable sobriety, performed his duties as an engineer with his usual competence. But inside, something had awakened. It was as if a crack had opened in his gray world, letting in a new light. Mathew began to notice what had previously escaped him. The sun's rays filtering through the branches along the avenue he passed every day started to feel like silent poetry. The sound of children laughing in the park ceased to be mere background noise and became a melody that could draw spontaneous smiles. The gentle wind brushing his face on morning walks, once ignored, was now felt with gratitude, like a tender gesture from life itself. The small things, those many consider insignificant, began to hold weight, color, and meaning. Then, a new, almost urgent desire arose within him, to be useful, to break free from the cocoon of pain and isolation and touch other lives. He discreetly researched and, without telling anyone, started visiting a seniors' care center on Saturdays in a more remote neighborhood of the city. It wasn't out of obligation or mechanical charity. It was something more genuine, a pull from the heart. There, he didn't introduce himself as the successful engineer, nor give inspiring speeches. He simply showed up, listened attentively, brought hot coffee and simple cake from a nearby bakery, shared stories from his youth, laughed at others' memories, swept the courtyard, watered the small garden. Gradually, he was welcomed with warmth, as if he had always belonged there. It was there he met Mrs. Dalva, an 82-year-old woman with bright eyes and white hair carefully pinned back with a floral clip. She liked to sit in the shade of a tree, watching life go by with a nearly sacred calm. One day while having tea, she casually confided, "I talk to God every day, you know? It's not praying, it's really talking. Just like I'm talking to you." He listens, and sometimes he answers. Mathew smiled kindly, but with skepticism in his eyes. Still, something about that sentence echoed in his mind for days. Talking to God. The idea seemed strange, almost childish, and yet comforting. It was such a simple and at the same time profound proposal, driven by a quiet curiosity, and perhaps by hope to rediscover the meaning that slipped through his fingers. Mathew decided to try. He didn't know how to start, or if he was doing it right. But on one of those nights when sleep refused to come, He simply closed his eyes and spoke in his mind. Not with memorized words or ready-made formulas, just spoke, like writing a letter without knowing if anyone would read it. At first he felt ridiculous. Talking to the invisible, to the uncertain, was strange. But he persisted. And over time, something changed. He realized it wasn't about hearing audible answers or seeing magical signs. It was something else. A presence. A silence full of meaning. A peace that needed no explanation. In those quiet conversations, Mathew began to feel embraced in a way he had never known before. As if someone greater, eternal, and infinitely loving, was truly there, listening without hurry, understanding every unspoken word, every hidden fear, every uncried tear. And so, without great noise or spectacular miracles, Mathew discovered something precious. Even in the darkest nights, there is a light that never goes out. The light born within when the heart learns to listen. Chapter 4. The Inner Voice. One cloudy afternoon, after another visit with Mrs. Dalva, who had gifted him with her gentle words and a contagious peace, Mathew decided to walk home, despite the heavy clouds promising rain. The air was damp, and a cool breeze whispered softly through the streets, like a murmur of time itself. There was something special about that day, though he couldn't yet say exactly what. As he strolled along the wet sidewalks, he felt something inside him stir, a heightened awareness of the world around him. Turning a corner, he spotted a woman standing beside her car, clearly distressed over a flat tire. Without hesitation, he offered his help. Rolling up his sleeves, he got his hands dirty with grease and patiently changed the tire under the light drizzle that had just begun. Further down the street, near a bakery, he noticed an elderly man struggling to open the heavy glass door. With a gentle gesture and a quiet smile, Mathew held the door open. The man thanked him with a look so sincere. It spoke volumes without a single word. Close to home, as he passed a small park, Mathew saw a little girl sitting on a bench, wiping tears from her eyes while her mother talked on the phone. He picked up a small fallen flower, carefully cleaned its petals, and handed it to her. She smiled through her tears, and that shy smile lit up the end of his day. These were simple acts, things many might dismiss as small or trivial. Yet that night, lying in bed, Mathew felt something different pulsing within him. It wasn't a fleeting excitement or the satisfaction of expecting praise. It was something deeper, more serene. A quiet joy, almost silent. A peace settling warmly in his chest like a soft blanket on a cold night. For the first time in a long while, he felt whole. In the early hours, he awoke without knowing why. The room was silent. No lights on, no words spoken, and yet, something filled the invisible space around him. It wasn't an audible voice or a mystical vision, but he felt, with an intensity beyond explanation, that a presence was there. A gentle but unwavering certainty swept through his soul, as if the very silence whispered to his consciousness, "You are loved. I have been here all along." And Mathew wept. But this time, the tears were not born of sadness or loneliness. They were tears of release. It was as if the invisible chains binding him to emptiness finally unraveled. Each tear seemed to wash away years of bottled pain, skepticism, fear, and the alienation from himself and the eternal. It was like being born again, not in body, but in spirit. Chapter 5. Rebuilding Mathew's transformation didn't come suddenly or spectacularly. No thunderbolts from the sky, no extraordinary revelations. It was a slow process, like dawn gradually breaking the darkness of night. There were still cloudy days when sadness visited like an old acquaintance. Some mornings began heavy, and the past occasionally returned with its pain and memories. But there was a crucial difference now. He knew he no longer walked alone. That quiet certainty became an anchor amid the storms of his soul. Fueled by this newfound awareness, Mathew began to rebuild bridges long left in ruins. He reached out to his older brother, someone he hadn't spoken to in years over reasons he barely remembered, perhaps wounded pride. He called, sent messages, and persisted until a hastily arranged coffee became the first step toward reconciliation. He wrote heartfelt letters to his ex-wife, not to rekindle the past, but to acknowledge mistakes, ask for forgiveness, and thank her for the good moments. He didn't expect a reply, and surprisingly, that was enough. He visited the mother of a childhood friend who had always welcomed him like a son. He brought flowers, cooked meals for her, and listened attentively to her familiar stories. On Sundays, he started planting trees in public parks as symbols of new beginnings. He donated books that had marked his journey to community libraries. Every night, without fail, he opened his gratitude journal, simply jotting down everything that had touched his heart that day. A smile, a conversation, the song of a bird. And always, before sleep, in the quiet of his room, he talked with the Father. Not with anxious requests, but with sincere words of thanks. Some nights he simply sat in silence, listening to his inner world, feeling that gentle, eternal presence that once seemed so distant, but now lived within him. Over time, Mathew discovered something essential. True strength does not come from what we possess, but from who we become. And he was becoming someone new, whole, free from fear, reconciled with himself and life. Epilogue. The reflection of heaven. Years passed. Mathew's beard now showed streaks of gray, and his eyes, once lost, held a serene light. Then, at the invitation of a community group, he was asked to give a talk about life's purpose. He had never spoken on a stage before. Nervous, with sweaty palms and a pounding heart, he took a deep breath and walked to the center of the room where dozens awaited his words. He looked around, seeing attentive faces, some anxious, others weary. Then, with no script memorized, he simply said, "I spent half my life trying to fill a void inside me. I chased success, recognition, distractions. I looked outside for what, in the end, I only found within. I discovered that the true meaning of life is not the absence of pain or fleeting achievements. Meaning lies in knowing that we belong to something greater, that there is a love who created us and never gives up on us. A love that follows us silently, that demands no perfection but patiently invites us to come home. And when you hear that call, everything changes. You change." For a brief moment, the room was silent. Then applause began, timid at first, then growing louder and warmer. Some stood up, others cried. But Mathew did not feel like a hero. He didn't need recognition. He simply felt deeply that he had fulfilled something sacred, to be who he was born to be. And that was enough. Mathew learned through time and heart that God does not invade or demand. He whispers softly when we are ready to listen. He doesn't force doors open, but waits for us to open them from within. He does not punish, but teaches with tenderness, like a father who sees the whole picture, including our falls, as part of the journey back to love. At last, he understood that the Creator was never far away, but always present, working invisibly in the everyday, in the depths of our being. That the divine spark dwells in silence, guiding uncertain steps and calming the storms of the soul. And above all, he realized true peace isn't found by changing the outside world, but by transforming the world within.